What would you do if your own family turned against you? For millions of dollars, I never thought it could happen to me until the day my daughter-in-law broke my arm over a lottery ticket. But trust me, the real shock came the next day at the bank. You won't believe what happened next. Watch till the end to find out. It all started on a rainy Tuesday, the kind of day where the sky looks like it's been painted with 1,000 shades of gray, and the world feels just a little bit heavier. I'd woken up with my knees aching, the dog barking at the mailman, and the coffee pot sputtering like it was on its last leg. In other words, it was a perfectly ordinary day. In my perfectly ordinary life, I never expected anything out of the ordinary to happen. Certainly, not the kind of thing that would make the evening news or have the neighbors peeking through their curtains. But there I was standing in line at the corner store, clutching my umbrella in one hand and my purse in the other, waiting for my turn to buy a loaf of bread and a carton of milk. The line was moving slower than molasses in January, and I found myself staring at the rack of scratch-off lottery tickets by the register. I'd been buying one every week for years, more out of habit than hope. It was my little ritual, a harmless way to dream for a few minutes about what I'd do if I ever hit it big. Maybe I'd finally take that trip to Italy, or buy a new recliner that didn't squeak every time I sat down. Maybe I'd just pay off the house and treat myself to a nice dinner. Nothing too wild when it was finally my turn. I handed the cashier my money and pointed to my usual ticket, the bright yellow one with the big red letters. "Feeling lucky today, Mrs. Carter?" he asked with a wink. I just laughed and told him, "If I ever win, I'll buy you a new cash register." He chuckled, handed me my change, and I tucked the ticket into my purse, not giving it another thought. It wasn't until I got home, groceries dripping on the kitchen floor and the dog circling my face, that I remembered the ticket. I sat down at the table, pulled out a quarter, and started scratching. At first, I thought I'd made a mistake. The numbers lined up in a way I'd never seen before. I squinted, rubbed my eyes, and checked again. 4 million, I nearly dropped my dentures right there on the linoleum. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might leap out of my chest. I must have read the ticket a dozen times before I finally believed it was real. I let out a whoop that startled the dog, and probably half the neighborhood. I danced around the kitchen, waving the ticket in the air, laughing and crying all at once. For a few glorious minutes, I was the happiest woman in the world. I thought about all the things I could do, all the ways my life could change. I thought about my son Mark and his wife Lisa, and how excited they'd be for me. I imagined us all celebrating together, maybe taking a family vacation, or finally fixing up the old house. But reality has a way of sneaking up on you, doesn't it? The moment the news got out, thanks to my big mouth and a few too many excited phone calls, my phone started ringing off the hook. Friends, neighbors, people I hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly wanted to catch up. But the first call, the very first, was from Mark and Lisa. I could hear the excitement in Mark's voice, but it was Lisa who took over the conversation. Almost immediately, "Mom, we need to talk about your plans for the money," she said, her tone brisk and businesslike. Not even a congratulations, not a single word about how happy she was for me, just straight to business. I felt a little pang in my chest, but I brushed it off. Maybe she was just in shock, or maybe she was trying to be practical. After all, $4 million is a lot of money. It's enough to change lives, to make dreams come true, or to turn people into someone you barely recognize. We agreed to meet for dinner that night, and I spent the rest of the afternoon in a daze. I kept the ticket close, checking it every few minutes to Mo. Make sure it was still real. I even called the lottery office just to hear them confirm it. "Yes, ma'am. You're our big winner," the woman on the phone said, her voice warm and cheerful. Congratulations, I thanked her. hung up and sat there staring at the ticket, wondering what on earth I was going to do next. By the time Mark and Lisa arrived, I'd calmed down a bit. I made a pot roast, Mark's favorite, and set the table with the good china. I wanted it to feel special to mark the occasion, but from the moment they walked in, I could tell something was off. Lisa barely looked at me, her eyes darting around the room like she was already counting the money. Mark tried to make small talk, but it felt forced, like he was just going through the motions as we sat down to eat. Lisa wasted no time. "So, Mom, have you thought about how you're going to use the money?" She asked, her fork poised in midair. I smiled and told her I hadn't made any decisions yet, that I wanted to take some time to think about it. But she pressed on, listing all the things they needed: a new house, a bigger car, college funds for the kids. It was like she'd been waiting for this moment. Her whole life. Ever get that feeling? Someone's about to ask you for a kidney. Yeah, that was me. I realized in that moment that winning the lottery wasn't just about the money. It was about everything that came with it. The hopes, the dreams, and, yes, the greed. I looked at my son, my only child, and wondered if things would ever be the same again, and that my friends was just the beginning. A few days after my big win, just as I was starting to come down from the clouds, Mark and Lisa showed up at my house unannounced. I was in the middle of my morning crossword, still in my robe, with a cup of coffee that had gone cold. I heard their car door slam and peeked out the window. There they were, marching up the walkway with purpose, Lisa in front, Mark trailing behind, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. I knew that look on Lisa's face. It was the same one she wore when she wanted the last slice of pie. At Thanksgiving only this time, the stakes were a little higher than dessert. I opened the door, and before I could even say hello, Lisa breezed right past me into the living room. Mark gave me a sheepish smile and a quick hug, but Lisa was already talking, her words tumbling out in a rush. "We've been thinking, Mom," she said, plopping herself down on the couch, like she owned the place. "This lottery win is a blessing for the whole family. We need to make some plans." I sat down across from her, clutching my coffee cup like a lifeline. "What kind of plans?" I asked. Though I already had a sinking feeling, I knew where this was going. Lisa launched into a list that sounded suspiciously rehearsed. "Well, first we need a bigger house. The kids are growing and we're just so cramped, and Mark's car is on its last legs. Plus, we've been talking about private school for the boys. And you know how expensive that is? We just want what's best for our family, and with your help we can finally make it happen." I glanced at Mark, hoping for some sign of reason, but he just stared at his hands, silent. Lisa kept going, her voice getting sharper with every word. "It's only fair, Mom. You wouldn't have this money if it weren't for us. We've always been there for you. Now it's your turn to invest in our future." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Lisa, I love you both, and I want to help where I can, but this money is for my retirement. I've worked hard my whole life, and I want to make sure I'm taken care of. I'm not just handing it over. You'd think I'd slapped her." Lisa's face went red and her eyes narrowed. "So that's it. You're just going to sit on all that money while we struggle after everything we've done for you." Her voice was rising, and Mark finally looked up, his face pale. "Lisa, let's just talk about this," he said quietly. But she was having none of it. She stood up, pacing the room, her hands flying as she spoke. "You're being selfish, Mom. We're your family. You owe us?" The words stun. Gee. But I stood my ground. I told her again, as gently as I could, that I wasn't going to give them the money. I offered to help with the boys' school fees, maybe chip in for a new car. But that wasn't enough for Lisa, not by a long shot. Suddenly, she was right in front of me, her face inches from mine. "You're making a huge mistake," she hissed. "You'll regret this." Before I could react, she shoved me back. I stumbled, my foot catching on the rug, and went down hard. Pain shot through my arm, white, hot, and blinding. I heard a crack, and then I was on the floor, gasping for breath. Mark rushed to my side, his face stricken. "Mom, are you okay?" But Lisa just stood there, her chest heaving, her eyes wild. For a moment, the room was silent except for my ragged breathing and the pounding of my heart. I tried to sit up, but the pain in my arm was unbearable. Mark helped me to the couch, his hands shaking. "We need to get you to the hospital," he said, his voice trembling. Lisa didn't say a word. She just grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The ride to the emergency room was a blur. Mark kept apologizing over and over, but I could barely hear him through the pain. The doctor confirmed what I already knew. My arm was broken. They set it in a cast and gave me something for the pain, but nothing could dull the ache in my heart. My own daughter-in-law, the woman I'd welcomed into my family, had hurt me over money I never thought I'd see the day. When we got home, Mark tried to explain. "She's just stressed, Mom. We've been struggling, and this money, it just seemed like a way out." I nodded, but I couldn't find the words to comfort him. I was too busy replaying the scene in my mind, wondering how things had gone so wrong so fast. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my arm throbbing in its cast. I thought about all the years I'd spent, putting my family first, all the sacrifices I'd made. I'd always believed that love was stronger than money, that family would stick together no matter what. But now I wasn't. So sure, I realized with a heavy heart that winning the lottery hadn't brought me happiness. It had brought out the worst in the people I loved. And as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. If Lisa was willing to break my arm over money, what else was she capable of? The fear settled in my chest like a stone, and I knew this was only the beginning of a much bigger battle. The next morning dawned gray and heavy, the kind of day that makes you want to stay in bed and pull the covers over your head. My arm throbbed in its cast, a constant reminder of just how quickly things can go sideways when money's involved. I shuffled to the kitchen, cradling my arm and trying to make sense of everything that had happened. I was still in a fog, replaying Lisa's angry words, and the look on Mark's face as he helped me up from the floor. I never imagined my own family would turn on me over a pile of cash. But as I sipped my lukewarm coffee, I realized I needed to be smarter than ever. If Lisa was willing to break my arm, what else might she try? What I didn't know, at least not until later, was that Mark and Lisa had already cooked up their next move. While I was nursing my wounds and trying to keep my spirits up, they were getting dressed in their Sunday best, ready to march down to the bank and claim what they thought was rightfully theirs. I could just picture Lisa in front of the bathroom mirror, practicing her concerned daughter-in-law face, smoothing her hair and rehearsing her lines. We're family, after all. I could almost hear her say, as if that was the magic password to unlock a fortune. Now I may be old-fashioned, but I'm not naive the night before. After Mark had taken me home from the hospital, I'd lain awake thinking about what to do. I knew I couldn't trust Lisa, and I wasn't sure about Mark anymore either, so I did what any sensible person would do. I called my lawyer, Mr. Jenkins. He's been handling my affairs for years, and if there's one thing he's good at, it's key. Keeping a cool head when everyone else is losing theirs, I explained the situation, and he didn't waste a second. "Don't worry, Mrs. Carter," he said. "We'll move the funds into a trust. First thing in the morning, no one will be able to touch it but you." I slept a little easier after that, even with the pain in my arm. So while Mark and Lisa were strutting into the bank, full of confidence and entitlement, I was at home quietly relieved that my money was safe. I wish I could have been a fly on the wall when they walked up to the counter, Lisa leading the charge with Mark shuffling behind her. I imagine Lisa put on her sweetest smile, leaned in and said something like, "Hi, we're here to make a withdrawal." From my mother-in-law's account, she's not feeling well, but she wanted us to take care of things for her. She probably expected the teller to just hand over a stack of cash. No questions asked. But here's where the story takes a turn. Instead of a friendly teller and a quick transaction, they were greeted by Mr. Jenkins himself, standing next to the bank manager, both of them looking as serious as a pair of judges. Mr. Jenkins is a tall man with a voice like gravel and a stare that could freeze water. He doesn't suffer fools gladly, and he certainly wasn't about to let Lisa sweet-talk her way into my account. "Good morning," he said, his tone polite but firm. "I understand you're here about Mrs. Carter's funds." Lisa, never one to back down, launched into her speech about family and responsibility, about how they were just trying to help me manage my affairs. She even dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, as if she was on stage at the Oscars. Mark stood beside her, looking more and more uncomfortable by the second. The bank manager listened patiently, then cleared his throat. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding," he said. "Mrs. Carter's funds are now held in a legal trust. Only she and her appointed trustee have access." Mr. Jenkins nodded his lips, pressed into a thin line. "And I am that trustee, unless you have legal documentation granting you access. There's nothing we can do for you. You could have heard a pin drop." Lisa's face went from smug to stunned in a heartbeat. She sputtered, tried to argue, but Mr. Jenkins didn't budge. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Carter's wishes are very clear. If you have any further questions, I suggest you speak to your own attorney." The bank manager gave them a polite but unmistakable look that said, "You're done here, Mark." Bless his heart, looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. Lisa, on the other hand, was furious. She stormed out of the bank, dragging Mark behind her, her heels clicking on the tile like gunshots. I wish I could have seen their faces. Priceless doesn't even begin to cover it. If only I'd had my phone to snap a picture, I'd have framed it and hung it right next to my lottery ticket. When I heard about what happened, I couldn't help but laugh. Even with my arm in a sling, it was a small victory, but it felt good to know I'd outsmarted them. I'd always believed in the best in people, especially my own family, but this whole ordeal had taught me a hard lesson. Money changes people. Sometimes it brings out the worst in them. That afternoon, Mark called me, his voice small and apologetic. "Mom, I'm sorry, I didn't know Lisa would go that far. I told him I loved him, but I needed time to heal physically and emotionally. As for Lisa, she didn't call at all. Maybe she was too embarrassed, or maybe she was already plotting her next move. Either way, I knew I had to stay one step ahead as I sat in my quiet house, nursing my arm and sipping my tea. I realized something important. I might have lost a little faith in my family, but I'd gained a whole lot of wisdom. And as for my $4 million, well, it was right where it belonged. Safe, sound, and out of reach. From anyone who thought they could take it from me, Mark and Lisa stormed out of the bank that day, humiliated and empty-handed, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a little vindicated. After all the drama, the shout, and the pain, both physical and emotional. It was a relief to know that my hard-earned windfall was safe from their grasping hands. But as I sat in my quiet living room, arms still in a sling, I couldn't help but feel a deep ache that had nothing to do with broken bones. It was the ache of disappointment, of realizing that the people you love most can sometimes let you down in ways you never imagined. I'd always prided myself on being a good mother, the kind who put family first, who believed that love and loyalty would always win out over greed. But now staring at the faded family photos on my mantle, I wondered if I'd been a little too trusting, a little too quick to believe that money couldn't change us. The days that followed were a strange mix of relief and sadness. My phone, which had once rung off the hook with calls from Mark and Lisa, was suddenly silent. Mark sent a few tentative texts. "How's your arm, Mom? And let me know if you need anything." But there was a distance in his words, a hesitancy that hadn't been there before. Lisa, for her part, disappeared entirely. No apologies, no explanations, just a cold silence that settled over our family, like a heavy fog. I tried to tell myself it was for the best, that maybe some time apart would help us all heal, but it still stung after all. Family is supposed to be your safe haven, not the source of your deepest wounds. As the weeks passed, my arm slowly healed, the bruises faded. The cast came off, and I found myself able to do the little things again, watering my plants, baking a pie, even tackling the crossword with my right hand. Instead of my left, I started going for walks in the park, letting the fresh air clear my head and the sunshine warm my spirits. I ran into old friends who'd heard about my big win and wanted to know all the juicy details. I kept my answers vague, learning the hard way that sometimes the less people know the better. I even started to laugh about it. Imagine little old me, the talk of the town, the woman who outsmarted her, owned family, and lived to tell the tale. But beneath the laughter, there was a new weariness, a lesson. Learned the hard way, I realized that trust is a precious thing, not to be given lightly even to those closest to you. I started keeping my lottery tickets to myself, tucking them away in a drawer where only I could find them. I met with Mr. Jenkins, my trusty lawyer, and made sure all my affairs were in order. We set up the trust so airtight that not even Houdini could have wriggled his way in. I even joked about hiring a bodyguard, though in truth I felt safer knowing I had a good legal team on my side. Mark eventually came around. Though things between us were never quite the same, he apologized more than once for letting things get so out of hand. I should have stood up to Lisa. He admitted one afternoon, sitting across from me at the kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. I didn't know what to do. I squeezed his hand, feeling the old bond between us frayed but not broken. We all make mistakes, Mark. The important thing is we learn from them. He nodded, his eyes shining with unshed tears, and for a moment I saw the little boy he used to be, the one who'd run to me with scraped knees and a trembling lip looking for comfort. Lisa, on the other hand, stayed away. I heard through the grapevine that she was still angry, still convinced she'd been wronged. Maybe she'll come around someday. Maybe she won't. I can't control how other people feel, only how I choose to move forward. And move forward. I did. I threw myself into my hobbies, joined a book club, and even took a cooking class. Something I'd always wanted to do, but never had the time or money for. I traveled a little, nothing too extravagant, just a few weekend trips to places I'd always wanted to see. I treated myself to a new recliner, one that didn't squeak, and a fancy coffee maker that brewed the perfect cup. Every time, most importantly, I learned to enjoy my retirement on my own terms. I stopped worrying about what other people stopped feeling guilty for putting myself first. I realized that happiness isn't about how much money you have, but about how you choose to spend your days and who you choose to spend them with. I surrounded myself with friends who made me laugh, who didn't care about my bank account, only about my company. I found joy in the simple things. A good book, a sunny afternoon, a phone call from an old friend. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone who finds themselves suddenly rich, it's this. Get a good lawyer and maybe a bodyguard, but more than that. Guard your heart, be careful who you trust. And remember that money can bring out the best and the worst in people. Don't let it change who you are, And if you ever win the lottery, take a deep breath. Keep your ticket close and enjoy the ride, bumps and all. So here I am, still standing, still laughing, and still living life on my own terms. My arm may have been broken, but my spirit sure wasn't. And as for Mark and Lisa, well, our relationship is a work in progress. But I have hope after all. Family is family even when things get a little messy. They thought pain would buy them power, that betrayal could force my hand. But this story is not about wealth. It's about the strength to protect what's rightfully yours, even from those you love. Thank you for watching this video. Share your thoughts in the comments. I truly value every story and every voice. Don't forget to subscribe to Tears and Strength and share this video with your friends.